By the early part of the 20th century, an estimated 20,000 non-white immigrants had settled in Britain's old port cities of Liverpool and Cardiff. Largely made up of African and Caribbean seamen, it was a community that was to grow rapidly.
It's the first time, really, that ordinary, say, working-class white people are in contact with blackness in a real way, you know, in a living way, in an actual way. But I'm sure that it also generated excitement in the minds of white women for this possibility of a new experience, a different experience, which is at your doorstep.
Around Britain, interracial love thrived, producing mixed-race households. In Cardiff's Tiger Bay, Lancashire lass Agnes Jolly and Caribbean seaman James Augustus Headley were falling in love.
My mother lived in a convent. She was a rather shy woman. At first she was I can't go to Tiger Bay, you know, but she went there, and when my grandmother saw my grandfather and he saw her, that was the beginning of a romance, and they married, and my mother was born. That was around 1909.
Agnes and James Augustus used all their savings to set up home. They would eventually be married for more than 30 years, until Agnes died. But mixed-race love like theirs was causing anger and anxiety amongst white men.
I think white men were very disturbed when they saw white women with black men, and this is particularly the case, of course, in 1919, when white British men had been demobbed, and coming back, finding not only that they have no jobs, but that their, quote-unquote, women are having relations with black and Chinese men.
It's a sexual threat. It's a threat to your own sexuality as a white man. You know, perhaps your wife will have a different kind of performance with the black man and get ideas. She might get ideas, you know, as to what real sexual pleasure is. And then I, as a white man, maybe I will not be able to satisfy her anymore. It really is a threat to my own personal sense of potency, you know, if I were a white man.
Unloved, disenfranchised, jobless. White men took their anger to the streets in the first race riots of the 20th century, targeting mixed-race couples. Around Britain, 5 people would be killed. Hundreds more would be injured. In Cardiff's Tiger Bay, Neil Sinclair's grandmother was about to feel the full force of the mob.
My grandfather had to escape out of the back of the house while the house was being attacked. My grandmother and my mother watched their front door being broken into and the house being ransacked. All my grandmother's treasured possessions and china ornaments, their cozy little home, was being destroyed. They didn't actually harm my mother, who was a black child, but they did beat up my grandmother, who had the audacity to marry a black man. The following day, the police told my grandmother it was her fault because she married a black man, that all this had happened. It was a dreadful experience for my grandmother because she kind of never came out of it. It was traumatic, and she became sort of somewhat introverted for the rest of her life after that experience.
The sad thing really is that, in fact, the black men were not walking phalluses. In fact, they were husbands. They had ordinary romantic relationships with white women that sometimes translated itself in terms of marriage. So they weren't kind of figures of potency. They were just ordinary people.
The riots subsided towards the end of 1919, but in their wake, the debate over controlling interracial desire continued. In 1928, the Chief Constable of South Wales, a senior member of Britain's establishment, voiced what could be a final solution: apartheid.
The day may come when public opinion will awake to the fact that our race has become leavened with colour to such an extent that it calls for action. Parliament may be urged to consider the desirability of bringing into existence in this country legislation similar to that which has been found necessary in the Union of South Africa.
The Chief Constable was saying, well, yes, that black people are a problem. And one of the ways in which they're a problem is that they form relationships with British women, which are not acceptable, and that they produce children of this mixed origin or dual heritage, as we'd say today, who at the time were considered a social problem.
The idea of apartheid never took off. For most people, it was just unworkable. As Britain headed into a new era, interracial love continued to thrive. Nothing, it seems, could control it. The Victorians had tried, with their scares, taboos, and moral vigilante squads. Even mob violence wasn't enough.
You can't legislate for the kind of relationships that people want to engage in. Clearly there have been laws in openly racist states such as South Africa, Nazi Germany, but even those laws have not been able to prevent people falling in love.
From now on, interracial love would be out in the open. With growing numbers of black people arriving from the colonies, it was no longer something white Britons could refuse to deal with.
What the history of empire has taught us, as it were, is that there's always been this constant struggle on the part of black people and white people to throw off and discard the kind of pernicious and destructive stereotypes which prevent love. I think that there is now the possibility that people could escape their stereotypes and actually just fall in love in a simple human way. And be attracted to each other, not on the basis of racial imagery, but on the basis of other human qualities.
But old stereotypes die hard, and new ones come along. Have we really put Victorian attitudes behind us, or are we still haunted by the ghosts of our past?